Thank you for making the time. I know how busy everybody is this time of year. It is super hectic, and I think it's a little more fresh in my mind than it has been in the past because I've been helping my son Jake get started with his new business, Private Paradise. And I'm very much starting from scratch, really kind of going right from zero, building a new company. It feels like opening a new branch or a new location or a new company entirely by times. So I totally understand what you're feeling. And I know that it is definitely hard to make time to show up for an event like this. So thank you for being here. I know that you're working on the business and not in it for an hour here, which is kind of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to share my 7 biggest mistakes, or at least the areas where I feel like I made the biggest mistakes that held me back the most, probably caused the most damage to me personally, to my family, to my employees, coworkers, customers along the way. And I think they're mistakes that I just see most people making. And it's kind of hard day to day when you spent 30 years making those mistakes and overcoming them to, I guess, explain it in a quick interaction with people. So sometimes what I really find stressful is if I'm talking to someone and they ask me to solve one specific problem, it often really almost hurts because it's hard for me to help knowing that there's this 1 hour conversation just to describe like what that evolution looked like for me and what the major categories are that are probably causing that symptomatic problem to be a problem enough that they may want to talk about that one thing. Hopefully that makes sense. But what I'm going to do here is jump right in and try to explain where I think I really missed the pathway along the way a few times and found myself, maybe on the wrong path for far too long, or many times just not even feeling like I was on one at all, which I think lots of small business owners and definitely plenty of us landscapers find ourselves in that position. And it's only natural. There's a few ways to look at it. One, you're young and you don't have the experience, which I've really gotten to love how Benji looks at past mistakes. Is I was too young back then to know any better. I love when he says that. So it could be age and experience, or it could just be that you don't have the right mentors around you and you don't really just have anybody to learn from. Now, us landscapers, many of us are high school graduates that started businesses. And coming out of high school, nobody taught you how to run a business, and you probably didn't understand the trade skills yet either. And so that's a pretty steep curve. At the end of the day, it's pretty impossible for somebody to just figure this all out on their own. And so that is why I created LeanScaper. And along the way today, I'm going to describe the mistakes I was making and how I overcame those mistakes and made changes. And eventually along the way, I built what I called the landscape production system to grow and scale my landscape company the way I did to a top 100 company. Now we call this the LeanScaper operating system. Obviously, we've made it a little bit more generic, and I'm here to explain how along the way my problems were overcome with systems and processes that really made it a little bit easier for me to evolve. And I'd really love to share how to overcome these big mistakes so that you don't have to make them, or at least not make them as long as I did. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna hop right in. My first big mistake was running without a compass. Now, somehow I always felt like I knew where I was headed. I don't think I wrote it down well enough. I definitely didn't have a big long-term plan. But I think what was happening for me is I was clear that I was building a business that was going to continue to grow. It was going to continue to provide more and more opportunity for anybody who was loyal enough to stay with me. And I just felt like if I kept doing the right thing, other people would keep doing the right thing around me. And I would keep creating this opportunity for everybody if they were loyal. Now, that was my biggest mistake, is I had this concept in my head that everybody just understood that I was going to make life better for them, which is kind of crazy. And I think many of us do this. As leaders, if they can't see where you're going, then what makes them loyal? And I really had this backwards. I just kind of assumed that people would be loyal if I paid them well and if I told them that the business would grow and there'd be some opportunity. But the problem is I didn't really ever write that down. And people around me felt really confused. Now, you can see my little diagrams here. Here you see me standing here with a frown on my face, which I think, being honest, I think there was a lot of days like that. Overwhelmed, really stressed. I felt incredibly lonely. I felt so lonely, it actually became hard to even connect with the people around me that were really, truly close, people that I loved, people that I trusted. Because when you get burned out and you feel like nobody understands what the problem is, you start to kind of disconnect from people. And then what ends up happening is all these other people down here, whether it's your family or your coworkers or your customers, they start to feel that tension, right? This energy starts to transfer. So they become more confused. And as they're more and more confused, you're more and more confused. Well, this was me, right? I'm standing up here feeling like, oh boy, I've grown this business to the point where it's now become my jail cell. My kingdom was 1 inch by 1 inch. If I wasn't there each day to oversee everything, then it fell apart, which meant I was stuck in my little box that I created, which I called a business. But this business wasn't serving me, and it wasn't serving everyone around me because I hadn't really enabled everybody around me to understand where we were even going or why we existed. The mission was clear to me. I wanted to provide for my family. I wanted to go out and do incredible work, the best work that could possibly be done in the landscape industry. And I wanted to create incredible careers for people that maybe grew up without the best upbringing or the best chance. So I always hired street kids and, maybe the less fortunate or the misfits. And I always tried to mold those people because I felt like they would be very loyal if I helped them create a better life. And so it was probably pretty altruistic, right? I was just thinking, hey, I'm going to take people that need the help, provide an opportunity, and we're all going to end up doing better together, which made a lot of sense. But I don't think I did a good enough job at explaining the mission and the vision and where we'd be in 10 years for many of those people to realize that this company could continue to provide and create that future for them. Because you've probably heard me say this before, I really truly believe that every single human is self-employed in the sense that they choose the company they go to work with, and they ultimately get out of bed and do that work every day to provide for themselves and provide for their families. And when we start to connect a mission from the company to that personal mission that we all have and share, then we can start to actually experience what I think we ultimately all want to experience, which is some love and connection at work. Now, you can't create love and connection when you're not entirely trusted or you don't entirely feel loyal. Now, what started to happen for me is as the business got bigger, my trust level in all of these people down here started to really shrivel. I just kind of started feeling like I can't rely on anybody. I can't really count on these people to go do the work properly. I go to get paid and there's a punch list a mile long. I leave the job site and they pour the concrete at the wrong elevation. If I don't show up and make sure that they're there leaving the yard at the time expected, they're not leaving the yard, right? They're there hanging around still. If I'm not there at the end of the day, the trucks aren't getting washed. There's just too many things for me to manage. So I start to lose trust. I'm frustrated. I don't believe in my team anymore. And leadership really does rely on that one thing, right? If the leader doesn't believe or trust in their team, then the team doesn't believe or trust in the leader. So it starts with you as the leader. Now, for me, I had a hard time seeing that for some reason. I've been a leader since I was a kid. I was a captain of a hockey team and I had a small business in school. I've always had to lead people. But for some reason, as the business got big enough, I lost track of this simple thing, which was I have to trust my team in order for them to trust me. It starts with me. It doesn't start with them. And that trust started, for me at least, the fix became the mission and vision. When I could start to explain to people, hey, this is why we exist and here's what we're trying to achieve. And if we actually succeed in 10 years, this is what life is going to look like. And that 10-year vision isn't the customers are going to be able to get these incredible projects. That's a given. In 10 years, we're going to have scaled the company to a size where there's opportunity for people at every level in the company. There's management training tracks. There's director level training tracks. There's opportunity to go start up other branches, or hey, maybe I could even create a scenario where people could become self-employed and start their own branch. Who knows, right? This mission in your business then allows you to create this incredible vision that allows you to share it with other people to motivate them and to create that loyalty whereby they understand where you're going and they want to be a part of it. Now, I didn't get this right. I just wasn't evolved enough as a leader. I'll use Benji's line, I was too young to know any better. Nobody taught me this. And so I ran without a mission and vision being like printed on the wall for far too long. And it really held me back and it hurt a lot of people around me. Now, the worst part about not having the mission and vision is I couldn't set long-term goals that people believed in. I would just go around and say, in 5 years, we'll be doing this, or 3 years, we'll be doing that. But they're not tied to the vision, so people don't really buy into it. So this was a big problem for me. I didn't have an annual strategic planning process, so I didn't sit with my team and say, here's what we're going to do in the next year. So nobody knew what we were going to do. So every time I did something, they'd just be kind of like, okay, I guess we're just going to go do what Mark says. Now, the problem is when you do that is people start to lose trust because every time you show up, you've got this big idea. Now, that was me. I always had a big idea. And all anybody around me heard when I would say these big ideas is, oh shit, how are we going to do this? We have 10 other big ideas that we didn't execute upon. And this has been a theme for me throughout my entire career. I still struggle with it to this day. It's such a difficult thing. When you're a visionary, you keep coming up with crazy ideas and everybody around you is confused. But when you actually have a strategic plan and you've got 20 of those ideas, together you narrow the focus and you come up with a hedgehog concept. And what that is, if you have never read the book Good to Great, read it. The hedgehog concept is the one thing. What is the one thing that we want to accomplish? What are we here to do? And when you've got the one thing, then your strategies start to make sense and you can create quarterly objectives that allow you to advance the cause on that one thing. And that's when you start to really make headway. So what I ended up doing, and what this big turning point was for me, is one of my mentors said, hey, Mark, have you read the book Good to Great? Because I was asking all kinds of questions. And so I read the book, and then I had everybody in my company that was a foreman or up read the same book. And now we had some common language. And so creating the common language allowed me to then start saying, hey, here's what we're actually going to be doing in the next quarter in order to unpack what needs to happen in order for this year's goals to become a new reality. So the cycle began with a hedgehog concept. This is it. What is the one thing that you want to be best at? You can't be best at 20 things. And now prior to the hedgehog, for me, I was all over the map. I was getting into this business and that business and the other. I wanted to vertically integrate, and so I just felt like I could do anything. Now, the problem with a little bit of business success is you've got money. And when you've got money, you really get stupid if you've got too much money and not enough strategy. Now, for me, I made that mistake on a massive scale. I'll tell you some stories a little later. Next up, my number 2 was mistaking activity for progress. Ultimately, what I was doing is I was always thinking, hey, well, we're working 60 hours a week, 80 hours a week. I've got a 24-hour shift in my shop. I've got designers working 7 days a week, and I've got all these things happening. And it seemed like a lot of activity, but the reality is there was no progress. And sometimes people mistake this. They just think, hey, let's hire somebody else. They'll solve this problem. And let's hire 3 more people in sales and 2 more people in ops. And let's get 3 more account managers. That's activity. That is not progress. Progress is figuring out how to do more with the people that you already have without adding more people and more complexity, but actually simplifying things. And that's what Lean is all about. Now, for me, my life sort of looked like this. I was super busy. I had all kinds of execution, react, execute, react, execute, react. I also kind of call this action, reaction, action, reaction. Every time something would happen, I would have to react. I would just be out there always trying to deal with what was coming at me. Now, most landscapers operate this way. Most tradespeople operate this way. Ultimately, there's a problem, I solve it. A problem, I solve it. A problem, I solve it. When the owner thinks that way, everybody in the company is forced to actually work that way. When there's no systems, no procedures, it's just a constant execute and react. Now, you can't possibly get better. There is no continuous improvement cycle in here. Maybe some of these reactions are small systems, but unless they're actually being deployed throughout the company in a systematic way, they're not really systems. Like oftentimes people think they have a yard system, they have a project management system, but the reality is it's all broken if somebody can't come in and figure it out within a matter of days. Now, I don't mean somebody with no experience. I mean somebody that's done this type of work in a similar industry should be able to walk in, read your systems, understand your systems over a 30, 60, 90-day onboarding, figure out the way the company works, and then run efficiently. Well, I certainly didn't build the business that way. I actually had to build the business in a way where everybody had to grow from within, because when there's no systems, everybody has to work in the company for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to figure out how it works because it's chaos. Now, when I figured out that the best way forward was actually to start focusing on planning with the team, again, strategic planning, then we could go out and execute that plan. In between here, we'd set some goals, and those goals would tell us what good looks like. So when we'd get out there and execute, that allowed us to do a little bit of measuring. Now, when we're measuring, what are we measuring? We're measuring profits, we're measuring sales cycle timing and close rates and estimated versus actual hours, and we're measuring revenue per hour and all kinds of metrics. And it sounds really confusing, but it's not. It's a lot less confusing to figure out a few metrics than it is to get stuck in this crazy busy wheel. That is super stressful. It feels like your head's gonna explode. You can't scale that way. So what I ended up doing was really learning that as I looked at the results, I would decide what I was gonna adjust next based on prioritization of where my problems really were. So rather than just getting better and better and better at laying pavers faster or planting more trees or building a swimming pool in half the hours that I used to, I actually started to realize that, wait a minute, there's a whole series of metrics. There's financial metrics, there's people metrics, there's customers metrics, and there's efficiency metrics. Well, prior to that, all I focused on was efficiency because that's how I grew up. My dad was a tradesman, I'm a tradesman. My way of making more money was get the work done faster. But you do hit a threshold. We could get the work done extremely fast. Hey, we had the highest revenue in the industry per person without all the systems even figured out because we were real good at selling high value work and getting it done really fast. But that didn't make the business perfect. It was far from perfect. Now, the big reason why is because I didn't have this mechanism when I was operating this way. Once I figured out that the measurements told me what to adjust, then we got laser clear. When we started to look at where our problems were using metrics, then we could decide what needed to be fixed and in what order so that we didn't waste our time fixing things that we've already fixed 25 times that don't need any more fixing. It's the stories we tell ourselves that dictate our future. When you only know one story, you're a one-trick pony. You just keep doing the same thing over and over. You have to expose yourself to other people. You have to learn better ways of doing things. And then miraculously, these adjustments make it easier to actually scale the business without your brain exploding. When I finally got this figured out, what I started to really realize was the problem that I was actually facing all along was that there was no playbook. There was nothing written down for other people to follow. So I kept hiring people and actually being ridiculous in thinking that I was going to hire somebody who could miraculously show up in my company and fix it all for me. And this is the mistake that most small business owners make. When you get overwhelmed, you start grasping at straws and you're now trying to pull in experts to fix it for you. Well, imagine what that feels like as the expert. Even if they come in with lots of experience, they come into a business with a business owner like me running around all over the place trying to keep up with everything. I don't give them enough time to sit down and actually clarify how I want things done. So they start doing it the way they think it should be done. Now, when I finally notice that they're not doing it the way that I want it to be done, what do? I decide they're not the right person for the job and I fire them. Well, I did this over and over and over again. Every time I'd say, they're not the right person, when the truth was, I wasn't the right person. I wasn't the leader I needed to be. First off, I didn't know who to hire. I didn't know how to hire. I didn't know how to attract those people. And I did not know how to onboard them. Now, the worst part is when I did bring them into the company, they had no idea what to do over and over and over again. And I couldn't figure out why. And here's what happened. Basically, what I kind of noticed along the way is I was operating with what I thought were systems, but they weren't really great systems. And so what was happening is I got stuck in this seed and startup level of business. Now, these are the 7 stages of business widely talked about. You can Google that or GPT that, and it'll describe what these stages actually look like. But ultimately, we're at seed, startup, struggle, systemized, scale, stewardship, and legacy. These are the various levels in business. Now, there's certain characteristics of each of these, and I don't have time to go into this entirely right now, but what I'm going to do is kind of give you a little bit of an idea. Seed is an owner-operator making every decision. So is a startup, right? This is owner-operator just showing up and doing what they know to be true, doing the best they can, making up for lack of knowledge with a ton of hustle, make a lot of mistakes. It's kind of 1 step forward, 2 steps back sometimes, but we just keep pushing through it. Now, I'm sure everybody here knows exactly what I'm talking about. As you start to go from startup up to systems, you kind of go through this struggle phase. Well, I got stuck in that startup struggle phase for a big part of my career, far too long. I just didn't know any better. Now, what happens is I like to kind of look at things in terms of like progress and time. Now, what I began to realize as I did start to get better mentors is I would probably have to create this company of my dreams over 5 years. Rather than me walking around thinking I've got everything figured out and pretending that I have things figured out while the wheels are literally blowing off the bus, the wheels being people, what was happening to me was I kind of lost track of the simple fact that I had to do something different in order to get out of the chaos curve. But what I kept doing was listening to my own story. I just kept doing the thing that I was doing the year before. I would increase my sales budget, and hell, I hit it every year, so I didn't really feel like there was a big problem. Profits were a little lumpy up and down, but I was always pretty profitable. So I'm thinking, nothing's really that wrong. Everything looks good. In fact, some of my early business consultants on the end of these years that were right in the middle of the chaos would actually say to me, hey, Mark, like I've got 20 clients. Nobody makes the money you make. And I'd be like, okay, great. Good for my ego. Rah, rah, rah. I'd be all fired up. I'm like, hey, I'm the best. That is a young man's ego. It is not healthy. at the end of the day, I was killing myself. Yes, I was more profitable. Yes, the business was growing fast, but at what cost? It is not worth growing a business if you ruin your mental health, if you ruin your physical health, you ruin your family life, and you ruin the lives of everybody who's following you. That is just not worth it. So no playbook, no performance. Nobody could follow me because they couldn't keep the pace. You know what? The truth is, I couldn't keep the pace either. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was not sustainable. I was up at 5 in the morning. I was working till 11 at night. I'd work Saturdays and Sundays. I'd lie to myself, and I'd go sit on my 48-foot boat down in the Toronto harbor and feel like a big wheel. But the reality is, I couldn't even take the boat out because I had to sit downstairs and do paperwork all weekend. Life was shit. Trust me, you don't want to be on a big boat with a computer attached to you nonstop. That's just straight up depressing. And the worst part is in my own mind, I always knew it. I knew that I wasn't living my authentic life. I didn't build a business to take from my life. I built a business to put back into my life. But somehow I lost track of that as the business scaled and I got over my own skis. Now, what ended up happening is when I really started to learn what systems meant. Now, systems mean a lot of things to a lot of people. First time I read the E-Myth book, I came back and I was like writing all the systems down that I needed. And it was like a fuel system and a material ordering system. And there was good systems there, but those weren't systems. I had no idea that I needed an operating system that would manage the financial side of the business, the customer side of the business, the people side of the business, and the operational side of the business. When I read E-Myth, my mind just went straight to operational systems because I'm an operator. And therefore, I would try to operate good enough to reach my vision while not actually building a plan for other people to follow. So there I am in the trenches, just operating away. Now, the next big thing that I kind of came about was this concept where I started to really, truly understand that the business needed me to be focused on building a team of builders. What I was doing was the direct opposite. I was building a team without builders. I was the builder. What did I need other people to build? I didn't know any better. So I just felt like, hey, if I keep reading 50, 60, 100 books a year was my pace for many years. If I keep reading, I'm going to somehow figure all of this out. But the problem was, when you read book after book after book and none of them really overlap and none of them really explain one operating system, what you end up doing is you end up doing all kinds of meaningless things that don't really drive the plan forward. Now, the worst part about this was, for me, what I was doing was I was building a whole team of yes people around me. People that would just say, okay, Mark, let's go do that, whatever. And if I was wrong, they were wrong. But guess what? If I was wrong, everybody would just say, well, Mark said, Mark said, Mark said. And I had to do the same. Every time there was something wrong, I'd say, well, it was my fault. It was my fault. It was my fault. When you build a team of builders, everybody contributes, everybody collaborates. When you go through strategic planning, you challenge each other. You talk about what you're going to do. You decide what priorities are. You decide together, and then people buy in. And when you hire actual leaders to help you do this, they take it upon themselves to go and execute on that strategy. And if they're wrong once in a while, you're all wrong together. It's not just you being wrong. That's the best part of building a team of builders, is you get to win and you get to lose and you get to learn together, and then you can create a culture of continuous improvement. You don't point fingers when anything goes wrong. You just kind of agree that, hey, we can do better. This didn't work out. We set a strategy. We didn't get the result that we wanted. So the strategy wasn't quite there. Let's adjust our strategy, measure, then we'll see what we want to change next time. But it just becomes a cycle. Now, the problem is when you have a whole team of people that just say yes, you don't have other people around you building systems and building the company around all of the strategy that you've actually created to get to the mission. Now, this is what we really wanted to fix in my companies. And what I always found was, hey, it's me here, and I'm at the front for a reason, right? It's my job to look out the front window. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? At the highest level, that's my strategy. The windshield is for the visionary. Now, I'm looking forward. Everybody else is looking side to side. That's what makes this bus so relevant, right? My sales team, I could hire salespeople who understood what we were selling, why we were selling it, who we were selling it to, what the revenue needed to look like, how to sell it, how to overcome price objections. All these things were now baked in through strategy, standard operating procedures, policies, training programs. That's what these things do. They enable these people to understand what good looks like without coming back to talk to me. They know exactly what the ICP is. They know exactly what the pricing looks like. They know exactly how to sell it. They understand the messaging. They understand when to say no. Now, if that's up to the owner, I got to turn my head and look backwards. Now, if I'm looking backwards and the bus is still going forward, we're at risk. There's no time for strategy because now I'm telling the salespeople how to sell. That's a problem. Now, next up, we've got the ops team. Again, no systems. So every time there's a problem with operations, we didn't get our delivery, the customer's upset about this, Joey didn't show up for work, Sam quit, we've got somebody claiming that there was a harassment problem, we've got a lawsuit from a customer because we didn't go and fix their warranty. All this stuff is happening because the ops people weren't qualified to run the operations. Now, they weren't qualified in my case, and they didn't have systems. So what happened? Every time they needed anything, they'd ask me. Again, what am I doing? Now I'm turning around. I'm not driving the bus. We're all over the road. It's chaos. Things are about to go crazy. Now, again, then it's finance, right? Hey, Mark, there is not enough money in the bank on Friday for payroll. Well, boom, I just jumped off the bus. Now I've got to go and find somebody to pay their bill so that I can make payroll on Friday. But ultimately, what I end up doing is I'm now saying to myself, oh my God, my finances are a disaster. I can't pay my bills on time. I can't pay payroll. I've got a line of credit. What if I lose my house? Now I got to go refinance my house. All these things are happening. And trust me, all of this stuff happened to me. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, many times. Every year when you're scaling like I scaled, you've got cash flow problems. Trust me. I could have 30% profit and feel like I was about to go bankrupt, or 30% EBITDA, sorry, not profit. Now, get through that finance issue. I'm constantly turning around there. Then it's design. Well, design matters. You know, for me, I don't like somebody just going and doing a pretty drawing that we can sell. I need designs that dictate how things get built. I need designs with grades, with sections, with construction details. Now, it would be completely unreasonable to hire a designer fresh out of school and say, hey, get my designs to the point where they're value engineered with a step-by-step plan, with no mistakes, with the grades right, with the right construction details, value engineered. It's too much. And so when you can't get that right, what ends up happening is they do these little line drawings that aren't very good, and maybe they color them and make them look pretty, and I go sell big jobs. But when I go to do those jobs, these poor guys over here can't possibly execute because the design is incomplete. Now, for me, this became a huge problem. The business is hyper-scaling. There's so many projects that we can't even design them fast enough. So what we start doing is using very simple drawings. Well, simple drawings in the hands of crews that are well-skilled crews doing complex work for super rich people with incredibly high expectations, that's a recipe for disaster. We all deal with it. And so I didn't build systems, procedures, I didn't have the standard details built out in my design software so that everybody knew these are our standard construction details. This is how we're going to do it every time, design with these standards. That's a system that was missing in the business. And so again, what ended up happening is I had to drive from job site to job site to job site to answer all those questions because we didn't detail the drawings. Now, why was I driving around doing that? Well, the designers were trying to keep up with design and the project managers were trying to keep up with materials and equipment and everything else. Why? Because there wasn't enough planning done in the first place. So I would always just take it upon myself to stop driving the bus and turn around and help. Now, the same thing would happen with my PMs and my AMs. The same thing would happen with techs, right? We'd have constant turnover with techs. These people are leaving as fast as they're coming. We're training them. They're confused. They're not happy. They're working for other people that aren't happy. The culture is not good, and you've got high turnover in techs. This is what happens when you build a team without builders. You as the owner are just constantly turned around. And so I had to create systems that enabled every one of these categories in order to fix the problem so that I could actually be a visionary and keep staring out of the front window and let other people deal with everything else around me. But I had to enable them with a playbook in order to allow that to happen. Now, number 5, selling on price, not on value. Why would I sell on price and not value? I started out selling luxury residential for premium dollars. Well, I'll tell you why. When the design department was struggling to keep up and they couldn't detail the drawings fast enough, and the field guys couldn't work efficiently enough, and the customers weren't happy because we weren't good enough at design, I got the big idea that we'll just start working for other people who also don't get the design right. And so now other people's problems became my problems. Then I got the big idea, well, wait a minute, what if we just started doing municipal work, government work? They have full-fledged engineers that draw the drawings and put out tender packages, and there's no room for error because they detail the daylights out of the drawings. Well, it seemed like a good idea, but it wasn't, because what ended up happening is I went from doing high margin work for people who really truly don't care that much about the price to the thinnest margins on the planet. Commercial construction for government, tender work. Now, we were pretty efficient, but the problem is our standards were too high for commercial. They don't put the time into the work that we do. And they've got a very, very different scale in which they price. Usually much higher revenue, much lower profit, much lower overhead recovery. It's a very different business than what I was in. Now, I'm not saying you can't do well in that business. Plenty of people do. But for me, going from one ICP like luxury, and not just luxury, but ultra luxury, to government, big mistake. Now, what happened was a ton of stress. Now I'm competing on price, which is a race to the bottom, as we all know. And that's exactly what happened. Profits for me went from nice double-digit profits right down to the toilet. Now, why? Because we moved too fast. You can't transition your ICP overnight. It takes years to do that. But when you transition really quickly, it actually really hurts, and it hurts really bad. This is really common for people when they scale. They start doing other ICP work, and it usually starts to blow up in their face. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if you're a startup, you're probably competing on price. I certainly did when I got started. Many of us do. But if you're doing mow and blow work on weekly service, and the other guys are $20 a week, that should tell you something. Like, people walk up to me at conferences and they say, hey, Mark, how do people make any money doing this when there's other people constantly undercutting the price? I hate to say it, the answer is right in the question. Stop doing the work that those people are doing. It's simple. Let them go do that work and get better than them at doing work that they're not capable of doing, or they're not set up to do, or they're not qualified to do, or they can't attract because they're not there yet, which means you have to keep evolving. And so there's the two ends of the spectrum. When you're small, you got to go up market fast. And when you are up market, don't go down market too fast. There's kind of two lessons in one here. But what I learned over the years is I have to focus on educating customers about what differentiates my service. Now, if my website does that, if my social media does that, if the way we answer the phone, the way that we send bids, the way that we design, the way that we build a portfolio, the way that we do our marketing, if everything says that, then what I've actually done is I've created a brand. And my brand differentiates me in the market. I didn't know this early enough. I just didn't see it. I knew that I was building a brand, but I didn't put enough emphasis on it, and I didn't make it part of my strategy. I just didn't think of it as a strategy. I thought of strategy as getting the work done faster and finding more work, but I didn't really connect how important brand was. I needed to build a brand that did the differentiation for me, so that strategic partners like architects and engineers and luxury real estate agents and luxury home builders would all look at us and say, that's the company that I want to partner with because they service the same customers as us. That is the secret to building a brand. You have to look and feel and behave like the company you want to be at all times. And when you actually get that right, then increasing revenue per hour becomes easy because better customers spend more money. And then you can afford better employees who can produce more per hour and produce higher revenue generating work. Stonemasons and carpenters and all these specialized trades became easy for me to attract after a while because our brand was attracting the work, and we knew that our revenue per hour was so high that we could pay $55 an hour fully loaded with pension and benefits and all these things because we were selling high revenue per hour work, and the only reason for that was the brand. I just didn't see it soon enough. Nobody taught me this. It was just something that I kind of figured out the hard way. Hopefully, this one is one that you're really taking seriously because it does change everything. Now, this one just kind of ties it all together a little bit, but ultimately, number 6 is CEO drift. This is me not evolving with the business. So what this means is I'm just out there at sea. I'm the CEO, I'm the boss, my ego tells me so every day, so that means it's true. But the reality is it's not true at all. I'm lost at sea. This is how I felt for many, many years, and I see it in so many business owners. Not evolving with the business. Your story needs to change if you want the business to change. It is never going to change on its own. That story is going to change by the rooms you put yourselves in. The people you surround yourself with in your business, and the people you surround yourself with in your learning time. You can't possibly evolve without hiring some mentors to come and work for you. And when I say that, I mean specialists that come and help you evolve the business. And also externally hiring consultants to come in and help solve problems quickly. Joining peer groups and learning from the peer groups themselves. Learning from the coaches, the facilitators. Going to events and listening to speakers about different topics. When I really started to do this, and I mean really started to do this, things started to change really quickly for me. I started to understand that, anytime I was doing the work, I'd heard all the same stuff everybody's heard here. Work on the business, not in it, all those usual lines. And we all know better, but I was still doing the work. Why? Because I like it. I still like it. I love it. Hell, Monday morning I was out pouring concrete. I love it. I love helping my son learn how to do the trade work. But I can't possibly scale a business to 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million and still be out doing the work. That's just simply ridiculous. Now, I had to be good at doing the work so that I could systemize it and tell other people how to do the work. And this is really important because I see a lot of landscape business owners who think they're going to keep scaling, who have no idea how to do the work, and they never hire people who know how to do the work. So what do? They keep scaling more problems. So it's very important, understanding how to do installs or maintenance, dealing with firefighting, knowing what to do when the fires start. And then, of course, just being in the daily grind. Well, I'm spending all my time there. Well, I end up floating at sea. I'm just out there. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, once I really started to understand that I needed the right mentors and I needed the right peer groups and I needed time blocking that enabled me to still do a bit of this work. And over time, I could take away from that as I replaced myself. But this component over here, actually focusing on strategy, on really documenting the vision and sharing the vision and hiring my mentors and the builders that I needed to actually build the business, that was really the turning point. This CEO drift stopped. I started to spend way more time here. My time blocking really started to look like 50 to 60% of my day was in this middle section. Maybe 20% of my days over here in doing the work. And then I'm starting to feel like this is so much more fun and it's exciting. And I can measure how the work is being done. And so this cycle starts to happen. And it all happened because I built a bridge. This is the bridge. The bridge to get from doing the work to getting to be that strategic thinker. That bridge is built out of strategic thinking time, finding the right mentors, working and being a part of a peer group, and really understanding how to create time blocks that serve all of your goals. When I started to see this clearly, my momentum picked up and the pace of self-improvement and business improvement was off the charts. People who knew me before were saying, wow, Mark, how's this business changing so fast? How are you growing this fast? What's happening? And I'd say, the truth is, everybody around me is growing the business like crazy. I can barely keep up. I can barely evolve fast enough because they're growing the business in my absence. Why? Because the strategy was clear, the vision was clear, and I hired the right people. It really became a different business once I built the bridge. Once I changed how I evolved, everything else changed quickly. Last, winning in business, losing at life. This, I've kind of trickled it in throughout the conversation, but ultimately for me, when I really truly got this right, and I didn't get this right that long ago, trust me, I started to realize that my mental health was actually the leading indicator of everything. I was 140 pounds overweight. I lost that weight in only 12 months. Why? Because the bridge was built. Find the right mentors, put the time in, discipline or disappointment. The bridge makes everything possible. Now, mental health is the leading indicator of everything. When I was 140 pounds overweight, and I'm sorry if you're overweight, but I used to be, so I have the right to tell you this, it's a mental health problem. That's what it is. It's not a physical problem. It's a mental health problem. If you're overweight, that's because you're suffering. You are suffering. The stress is driving cortisol into your body, and every time you eat, it goes straight to fat storage because you're in fight or flight. You're just trying to survive. Well, I lived there for 15 years and I gained 10 pounds every year. So no wonder I was 140 pounds overweight. You can't let yourself stay there. Mental health dictates your physical health. Once I got that really in line, my energy systems were off the charts. There is never a time when I'm hungry. There's never a time when I'm tired. I can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning and get up at 6 and go like hell because my mental energy is clear and my physical energy is clear. Everything that felt like a big deal before, getting off the couch or walking up the stairs, that's a joke. I knew better than that. I played hockey. I worked like a dog. I used to lay 1,000 square feet of stone a day, but somehow I let my body get to the point where it was affecting my decisions. I didn't have the energy to go and do what I wanted to do because I had let my physical health decline. But it all started with the mental health piece. Now, what happened next? Well, hey, I completely screwed a marriage. I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy for years. I wasn't a good person. I wasn't showing up the way I needed to show up. I'd hear myself telling lies to my wife, the person that I would never want to lie to, ever. I grew up before God. I don't lie. Why am I lying all of a sudden? But I was just trying to keep too many people happy. And again, when you're over your skis and you're making all these mistakes, you can't keep up. And you start to let people down around you. And when you start to feel like a failure, everything starts to fail because you feel like a failure. Let's be honest. Now, when marriage and family aren't going well, nothing's going well. That's my reason for being. My divine masculine energy wants nothing more than to provide for my wife and my family. That's my why. Now, when you lose track of that why because you're so overwhelmed with running a business that you built simply to provide for these people, and then you let it start to take over all of your time and your happiness, you ruin the very mission that you're on. And when the mission's gone, everything's gone. You can't see it anymore. Now, this is what I see most small businesses are doing. They forget that they're doing it for these people. The reason that you're doing what you're doing is for your marriage, for your family, and for you. Now, don't ever tell yourself any lies. All they want from you is more time. And if you're trading all of your time for money in the business because you haven't figured out how to strategically operate it, you're probably ruining your relationships. Spiritual life with God. I grew up before God, but somehow I kind of disappeared a little bit. I always believed in God and I always felt it. And I've always been very spiritual and I feel like I'm really in touch with my soul. And I have been from the time I was young. But somehow I just lost track and I stopped talking to God. I stopped reading the Bible. I stopped thinking about God. I just kind of let him disappear out of my mind. But anytime there was something really wrong, I could feel God was there. And I still relied on God. And when something really went wrong, I'd have the conversations that I used to have when I was younger. But again, I just didn't make time for it. It wasn't intentional, just didn't make time. Now, ultimately, my CEO energy was completely drained as a result of operating this way. When your CEO energy is drained, you have no time to coach, no time to help other people. You definitely don't have time to create systems and SOPs and policies, and you don't have the energy to lead other people. Things just don't feel right. And ultimately, the business success suffers in the long run as well. And I certainly found that when I finally lost my interest and lost my track of mission, I wasn't interested in running the business anymore. I just wasn't interested in it. And that happens to most of us at one time or another. But you really are going to have to find a way to connect all of these together. And for me, that strategic planning process is it.
Awesome session, Mark. And I think we'll wrap. Really powerful session. As always, thank you so much. For the 258 of you that were here, thank you for coming. We are going to do more of these in the future, so keep your eyes on your inbox for more amazing events like this coming up. Have an awesome rest of your week, everyone. Take care.